We are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. Well, Bitcoin has dipped again, and some people are freaked out, but it's probably not permanent. But still, it might actually be an indicator of something bigger, like the real dollar strengthening, which is good news for all of us. And in other news, the Washington Post has had another big round of layoffs, and it seems like it could be slowly going under. But this show can't be all good news. Our education system has been broken for a while, but this winter it seems really to be taking a very public dive. New York City is implementing some big socialist mistakes, and kids across the country are ditching school, prompted by teachers and administrators, to protest ICE and more nonsense. And for Unhinged, Kathy Griffin is doing what she does, which is act totally crazy on camera for everyone to see and saying off-the-wall stuff all the time. All right, so we are going to talk about all of this and more on episode 525 of the In the Tank podcast. All right. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here. We are the In the Tank podcast, and we're so thrilled to be here. I accidentally left notes in my show flow notes here about New Year, but it's definitely February now, so I'm not going to talk about that. I am Linnea Lukin, your host, and as usual, we also have Jim Lakely, Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute. We have Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow, and Chris Talgo, Editorial Director and Socialism Research Fellow. How is everybody?
Good. Doing great. I'm sorry. I usually try to drop a stinger in there for you. So you may have lost your rhythm there, but that was on me. I just didn't have time for it this week. So.
All right. Well, guys, before we get started, as always, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like this video, and remember that sharing it helps to break through some of YouTube's suppression. Even just leaving a comment helps us. And if you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review as well. So I don't know. There's so much in the news this week, but we are kind of taking a slant towards the education topic today because that's important. And there's been a lot of, videos going around and stuff of kids walking out of school to protest ICE. Really just kids wanting to, not be in class, I'm sure. But we have, for our Unhinged segment today, our good friend, Kathy Griffin, who is at... Yep, thank you. She is at it again. You will recall, if you weren't aware of this in the past, that she really does not like Trump. She was the comedian who posed the prop of his severed head a couple years ago. It seems that her ire also extends to Melania and anyone else connected with the Trump administration and Trump family. She posted a recent video fear-mongering about ICE and confirmed rumors that she has suggested in the past that people should make lists of their MAGA neighbors in order to shun and harass them. Breitbart reports her saying in the video, "Yeah, that's right," she exclaimed, and went off to say that ICE guys are infiltrating liberal groups and outing their anti-ICE spy insurrection networks. There's a state in the United States that is currently occupied, she said, but ICE is everywhere. I just want to remind you, she blurted out. So that's not paranoid at all. Oh, yes. Here it is. I'm not sure if we'll get sound from it or not. But
detention centers, which are really concentration camps. Call it what it is. They're concentration camps in the United States of America in 2026. So take that in. And I know you don't want to participate in something radical. I don't either. I wish I could just go on the road and do my funny stories about celebrities or making fun of politicians, but not even have to acknowledge this. But it is happening all around you. It's happening around you. I live in Los Angeles. It's happening at targeted places in Los Angeles. And I think it's time to talk to the neighbors in real life. It's time to talk to your neighbors, find out if they're MAGA or not. Sorry, but we have to know who's on our team and start to plan. Is there a way we can do something as a community? When I hear from my followers in Minnesota, they describe a very sophisticated channel of a system of things that they do to help one another. And they use encrypted apps. And like I said, everyone has whistles and honks their horn, but they organize in small groups. And they have told me that they learned this from the George Floyd incident because George Floyd was murdered 20 blocks away from these other murders, roughly. And so they said they learned a lot from that experience. So I'm just telling you guys, live your life, but be conscious of this. And if you're silent, you're complicit. Sorry, I know I'm being a judgy bitch, but that's how I feel. Here I am being preachy.
Okay, now we're going to pause that. Yeah. So if you're silent, you are complicit, you guys. Isn't that great?
That's great.
Jim,
Even her dogs have had enough of her nonsense.
Yeah, they're both asleep. You said that her I guess like personality or her energy levels are very sleepy in these videos, Jim. What medications did she prescribe that would cause this?
I know. Well, apparently she gave that medication to her dogs too. I mean, they've had enough of her nonsense. Like they're playing dead and wishing they were. I mean, I would too if I had to live with that kind of nonsense day to day. It's really kind of sad. I mean, Kathy Griffin was in Pulp Fiction. It was a little bit part, but if you know the scene, you know the scene. She was on a network sitcom. Now look at her. She's just miserable. One of our viewers here said TDS is real, Trump derangement syndrome, and it really is. And it's just sad. But the idea that we're living, that we have concentration camps now in this country, it's crazy talk. We've talked about this a lot, especially in the unhinged segments of this podcast, that people there are half this country, I don't think it's really half this country, but a good number of people in this country live in an alternative universe. They believe things that just are not true, and they are living miserable lives. And I want to feel sorry for them until you listen to what they say and you understand where they actually want to bring this country. And what they say is crazy, and where they want to bring this country is someplace very, very dark. So I don't think there really is a cure for Trump derangement syndrome. After he is gone from office, maybe even after Trump is gone from this mortal coil, these people will still be raging against Trump somehow.
You know what, Jim? I don't think that's true. I think that when the next Republican president comes around who is not Trump, they are all going to be talking about how much they miss Trump, how great Trump was in comparison to whatever the newest Republican is, because that's what they do every time, right?
That is
every
the pattern,
current Republican is the devil, and all the other ones were better, no matter what.
I find it a bit scary that her dogs are complicit in whatever ICE is doing in Minnesota. I'm going to go silent so people will understand that I'm complicit as well.
That is actually something that's very, very, very common now. It's like silence is complicity. Or I remember I was driving out to go out to dinner and I passed a local high school. This was when Black Lives Matter protests were beginning. So this was, the summer of 2020, and I was driving to go to dinner, and I was passing a local high school, and a young white girl was holding a I just made something go off in my thing, but she was holding up a sign that said white silence is violence. And I just like, this is a person who was taught that in their public schools, which we're going to talk about here pretty soon. But that's absolutely, frankly, un-American. If I do not choose to raise my voice and repeat your point of view, that is not violence. In fact, speech or no speech is also not violence. But this is the world we live in now, where people genuinely, I sense, believe this, but it is completely nonsense. I'm allowed to not agree with you, and I'm allowed to keep my mouth shut because I don't want to, ape your liberal shibboleths.
Well, what's kind of amazing with that is that that's kind of how like conservatives have, and this was probably a mistake on our part for a long time. That's how conservatives have like survived in a kind of like leftist dominated culture for so long, is just kind of keeping your mouth shut. And the old adage has always been like, if a celebrity doesn't talk about politics, that's a good indicator that they're actually right wing. But now that's not okay. You have to be affirming the party line in order to get away with your political position. It's just commie gobbledygook, right? Do we have that drop? Not in this show? Okay. Pity. Shame. All right. So that wasn't the only thing that Kathy Griffin went off.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Fantastic timing. Thank you.
Yes.
That wasn't the only thing that Kathy Griffin went off on. She also took great frustration with Melania Trump's new show. She said, she's been for years openly calling for the deaths of people for whom she disagree. Breitbart reports just last month she was wishing for President Trump to die. She's called him a fascist dictator. She's very angry at Jeff Bezos for daring to air the Melania Trump documentary or to produce it. So it's just a whole bunch of crazy. But I wanted to highlight it because the last couple of weeks we've done a really good job of mostly highlighting random nobodies being crazy. Here's someone who's not a random nobody also still being crazy. So I'll get into our main topic here. And this one is important. Because it's also an area that I know very little. So Sam, you are going to have to explain things to me here. So you brought this issue to our attention. The recent drop in Bitcoin's price is pretty substantial, but not, I would say, like earth shattering for people holding it, unless they like just got in on it, of course. But the last few months, it has dropped in a bit of like a stair-step pattern. And this post says that 44% of Bitcoin supply is, quote, underwater. But you suggested, Sam, that this could actually indicate a good thing is going on long term, as it comes on the tail of Trump naming Kevin Warsh as the successor to Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve. Can you explain your reasoning there? Because I'm sure our Bitcoin holding members of the audience aren't thrilled.
Yeah, I sure can. As soon as the rumor came out, which was Thursday late, that Trump was going to nominate Warsh, the stock market fell. The price of gold fell immediately. So the stock market fell on Friday. And that's an important thing because people had been running to equities and they had been running, which is the stock market, and they'd been running to gold. And they had been running to Bitcoin because they were looking for a secure place in which to put their money, because the Federal Reserve, which is pushed by the federal government by overspending. Okay, so the Federal Reserve had been diluting the money supply, creating inflation, and so you don't want to keep dollars. You don't want to hold on to them. You want to put them in something else that will be more secure. Well, one of those places, of course, was Bitcoin. And then what happened was, as soon as it became clear that Warsh, who is a strong dollar guy, as soon as it became clear that Warsh was going to probably be the next Fed head, I assume that he will be confirmed by the Senate. As soon as that became clear, people just a lot of people got out of Bitcoin. They traded it in to take their profits. Because remember that if you bought earlier and it was going up, you're still going to take a profit, even if you take it at the level it is now. So this is not a bad thing. It's obviously some people may have lost on their Bitcoin because they felt they had to get out even at a loss, although I doubt that there was much of that. What this really does is simply recalibrate the value of the dollar. And it shows that if you pay attention to your currency and are honest about it and create a stable currency, people will want it. And that's really what's happening here. I think this will turn out to be a long-term positive, that the dollar will continue to become stronger. The only thing that could kill it, the only thing that could hurt it, would be for the federal government to start overspending again, because that creates inflation. I don't think they will. I hope that was clear.
What is it though? Because I really don't know anything about any of this. But what's the position of Kevin Warsh that's different than Powell that's going to make it a better situation?
That's a great question. The position of Warsh is, well, let me go to the position of Powell. The position of Powell is that he's following Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen, in that he's saying that we need to expand the money supply so that we can avert a recession. But then, as soon as unemployment goes down, we have to cut the money supply. So what they do is they operate very much in interest rates. So they raise the interest rates or lower the interest rates. Now, the big difference with Warsh is that he looks at the fundamentals of the economy and says, the important thing is what people are doing in the economy. The important thing is not what the speculative, where the speculative money is going. The important thing is what value are people adding to the nation, and what are people paying for those values. That means, because what the price you pay for something gives its value compared to the other things. And what that does is it pushes the resources, human and physical, into areas that are going to create the most value. So that's how the price system works, and it's a great thing. So what happened here was simply changes of prices and changes of relative prices. What has happened over the past 2 decades is that the Federal Reserve, by overexpanding the money supply, has inadvertently, possibly deliberately, pushed money out of very many quite good enterprises and into equities, and especially speculative ones. And the fact that so much money went into Bitcoin, which to be quite fair about it, it's not really a real thing. It's an interesting concept, and it may well be a very good place to put your money, but it's not like putting your money in gold or gold mining stocks or things like that, or in houses. So when you do this, you are creating incredible distortions in the economy, and those distortions they lower simply the amount of goods and services you're going to produce. So what Warsh stands for is producing goods and services. A sound dollar will make the prices of goods and services tell the truth. You see, if the prices are lying, which is what happens under inflation, it also happens under deflation. But if the prices are lying, then you get a bad distribution of the production of goods and services and bad distribution of them. So this is a very good thing. And I think that there's this little special part that I want to get into just very briefly. I promise.
Yeah, please do. Because Sam, just before you do, I just want to say, this is something actually that, Life, Liberty, Property does a lot of work on, right? And this is it's something that people, their eyes kind of glaze over a little bit with some of it, because either they don't, they don't understand much of the background, like myself. They don't, fully get how it all connects. But your newsletter and you do a really good job at making it a lot more clear than like just, I don't know, just sitting there staring at Fox Business all day or something.
Thank you. That's my work mission. It really is. It's because so much of what we believe about the about economics and in particular governance is flat out wrong. It's just wrong. And a lot of this has to do with the ideas of John Maynard Keynes, a British economist who became popular in the 1930s, basically by saying, yes, running up government debt is a great thing. No, running up government debt is the opposite of a great thing. It is a very damaging thing. But one thing I love about Warsh's point of view is that what Warsh says is we don't need to have high interest rates in order to have a sound dollar. We can change that through, there's an overnight repo thing. I won't get into that, but that's what banks charge one another for moving dollars around. But the big thing is, how is the Fed's balance sheet? How much does the Fed own? And those securities that the Fed owns, the Federal Reserve, which is their central bank, when the Fed sells securities, it tightens the money supply. Or excuse me, when it sells securities, it tightens the money supply. When it buys securities, it loosens the money supply. So what you do is, if the Fed's balance sheet gets very big, then you are automatically creating inflation, and that's what they've done. What Warsh says is you don't have to raise interest rates to fix the economy. What you have to do is deal with the Fed's balance sheet. And guess who's been saying that for years now? That's, if you go to Life, Liberty, Property and you look at the old issues all the way back to the beginning, about 4 years ago, I've been saying that it's the Fed's balance sheet that we really have to attend to. So that Warsh it stands for this is such an exciting thing, because what it means is that he recognizes that you can fix the dollar without super high interest rates that blow up the economy. So that is absolutely wonderful. It's great to see. I very much hope that he will get in there, that he will be confirmed, and that he will succeed in persuading the other Fed governors to make this very, very smart choice.
I've got a little different take on this. So first of all, I don't think it's fair to use Bitcoin as a metric in which to assess the health of the U.S. economy or the Federal Reserve. I think that Bitcoin is almost totally untethered to those fundamental economics, and it's almost more speculative. It's almost like a gambling market. Like Sam said, it doesn't have any inherent value. It's not like gold. It's it's not like a stock where it actually pays dividends or anything like that. So there's that. Second of all, last time I checked, the federal government's going to be running $2 trillion deficits for the next 10 years. So good luck, reducing that supply of money that's going to be in the economy over the next 10 years. So
I could answer that point too.
I mean, just to say, I'm no macro economist here, but at the present state, things do not look very well. And lastly, John Maynard Keynes, he didn't say that you should just run deficits up to high heaven. He said you should only do that in a crisis. He actually said during a time of prosperity, non-crisis, you actually should be paying down that deficit. We have not done that. So just a couple of things.
Keynes did say that, but Keynesians ignored that part. Their belief is that we owe it to ourselves. Those are good points. I mean, I fully agree with you about Bitcoin, that it's not a measure of the value of the dollar, but it is changes in Bitcoin are a measure of changes in the value of the dollar. So that is worth looking at.
I disagree with that, because I think that a lot of Bitcoin trading is based on panic and based on
right,
like these people that don't really understand what's going on, but they're just trying to make a buck in the Bitcoin market. And
my point
that's
was
very dangerous. That is super dangerous.
My point in the Life, Liberty, Property piece was that the Bitcoin shows what people think of the Warsh nomination and what they think the Warsh is going to do. And I think that is accurate. The $2 trillion deficits, I fully agree with you. I don't think we should have any federal deficit at all. But of course, what are the chances of that happening? However, it's really important to recognize
$2 trillion spending bill. So, generally speaking, I do like President Trump and his policies and stuff. But when it comes to being a, economic hawk, he is not.
One thing that I'm going to be writing about in coming issues is the ideas of a terrific economist, John Rutledge. And what Rutledge points out is that the federal deficit is all about cash flow. But the real importance to any person or household or government is the ratio between debt and the assets that you own. You don't look at your household and say, "Hey, I've got pretty good cash flow this
but our
month,
debt to GDP is
so
higher
I'm
than it
going to
was
so I'm
during World
going to
War
borrow
II.
I'm
Our
going to
debt to
borrow."
GDP ratio is like catastrophic right now.
Yeah, that GDP is not wealth. That
GDP is the
GDP is
wealth of
cash
the
flow.
United States.
No, it's not. It's not.
Well, it's one way to measure
That's
wealth.
production. That's annual production, which is a cash flow. What you're
All the
looking
goods
at
and
is the
services
actual
of the
total wealth of the country, which is somewhere in around 250 trillion total wealth of the United
but
States.
that's on
And
paper.
so what Relich points out, and I fully agree with him, is that the amount of debt that you have, the amount of deficit that you have, you're creating debt, you're borrowing, no question about it. It is bad, and I don't like I say, I don't like this debt at all, and I don't want any of it. But the fact is that the American economy is the biggest in the world by far, and our federal deficit is actually a very small amount compared to the overall wealth of the United States. So if you look at that, if you look at the overall wealth of the United States, you look at our deficit and you compare it to what other countries have, because their wealth is so much smaller
I really
than ours.
disagree with that, because what about our
very good.
unfunded liabilities? We have hundreds of trillions of dollars in unfunded liabilities.
That goes back to something that I've written about before, where I say, there's no such thing as mandatory spending. There's no such thing.
Oh.
You can reverse it anytime you want. So
Brandon,
I just think
Warsh is going to be a much better Fed Reserve chairman than Jerome Powell. I think Jerome Powell has been very political in his tenure. However, I don't think that he's going to come in and just magically cure our huge economic problem that is going to have to be addressed at some point in my lifetime.
Warsh will be infinitely better than Powell and Yellen and Bernanke. He will be infinitely better than,
but not if
them,
Congress just
because his focus is on one thing, which is that the Fed's job is to create a stable dollar. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean unchanging prices.
The Fed's job is supposed to be, this goes back to the origination of the Fed. It was supposed to be the backstop. The fact that it has its dual mandate of trying to micromanage inflation and micromanage unemployment is just a complete joke. And as its scope has increased, what's happened? It's gotten worse and worse and worse. Honestly, I think we would be much better off if we were to gradually eliminate the Fed.
I think we should eliminate the Fed. And I also think that the dual mandate is a silly thing. It's not even so much bad as it's just silly. It gives the Fed an incredible amount of freedom to mess things up, and that is what they've done. They keep micromanaging the economy, and it's not their job to do that. Let the people decide what the prices of things should be. Let the people decide what the values of things are. So I do agree with some of these points you're making, but I think that the key thing we have to bear in mind is you have a system right now. You have the Federal Reserve. You have a central bank. Is it going to be better now than it was before? This is a huge difference. Warsh's point of view on what the Fed should be doing and how it should go about its business is diametrically opposite of what we've had for the last 20, really 30 years, because Greenspan was expanding very rapidly the money supply as well. So this is a very different Federal Reserve that we're going to be seeing, and it will be much better. It's not going to solve all the problems of the world. It's not going to solve all the problems of the United States. But what it is going to solve is the excessive expansion of the money supply, and then the excessive contraction of the money supply, always doing it to both of those things too late, too much, and for too long. So that's the big problem we have. if you have a central bank that's looking at the fundamentals and that recognizes that the fundamentals, the economic fundamentals, are the production of goods and services in the private sector, then you have a central bank that's at least the best you can get in terms of a central bank. Now, I would tie the dollar to gold. That would be my solution. But we're not there, and we're not going to get there. But this is just as good as you can get without doing that. So as I say, there are a whole lot of factors involved, and the points you bring up are definitely important things to consider. But I think that Warsh's point of view does consider them and does the best that the central bank can do in the circumstances we have.
Well,
Good
regardless.
debate. I
Oh,
love
I'm
debates.
sorry. Yep. We love debates on this show. This is for our audience here. This is like what The Office is like all the time at Heartland. So, and when you get all of us together for like a meeting or something, this is what it's like. So you're getting a glimpse into that. And I would say, we're not bashing Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a pretty good investment, it seems, especially if you got in when it was worth like what, $20. But I mean, imagine that right now. But I always wondered too, what it would be worth, like if the sun splashed us with a solar flare and fried all electronics, right? When you're traversing the wasteland, you probably want something more than data on a thumb drive, which is why you should probably diversify a bit with things that have never been worthless, like gold, specifically gold from our friends at Advisor Metals. So, as I alluded to here, a lot of people in prepper spaces and on conservative and libertarian shows will hit you with ads for buying precious metals. They're not wrong that they're a good investment, but you want to be careful about who you buy your metals from. It's not all the same. At In the Tank, we trust Advisor Metals over all of those other guys, and that's because we know that the person running the place is absolutely the best of the best. Ira Bershadsky is a great friend of Liberty, and he owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. What does all of that mean for you? Well, it means everything Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be factual. There's no sketchy sales pitch or bait and switch. He's held to the highest ethical standards, and there is full transparency, which is way too lacking in other places. If you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you want to have something better than a digital currency for traversing the wasteland, if you are planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty, if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. He is going to make it super easy for you. Please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. Please go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. And when you talk to Ira, make sure you let him know that we were the ones who sent you. That helps us as you're helping your financial future by diversifying with precious metals from Advisor Metals. Thank you very much. Ooh, that was a good one, wasn't it? I'm pretty happy with that one. The audience was anticipating that one, and that's some of the best segues that you can do. All right. Now to get to Jim's favorite topic of today, which is the Washington Post mass layoffs. We are all, as I said, very torn up about this news. We will sing them a dirge, especially Jim. From the Associated Press, Washington Post cuts a third of its staff in a blow to a legendary news brand. Legendary, and that word encompasses a couple of different things, but let's go. The Washington Post laid off 1/3 of its staff Wednesday, eliminating its sports section, several foreign bureaus, and its books coverage. And also, this is something that this article does not mention, but they laid off 13 people from their climate desk. I'm not sure if that was the entire desk. It's more than, it's 12 more people than a climate desk needs, but whatever.
Yeah.
And anyway, so the Associated Press calls this a brutal blow to journalism and one of its most legendary brands. The Post's executive editor, Matt Murray, called the move painful but necessary to put the outlet on stronger footing and to weather changes in technology and user habits. We can't be everything to everyone, he said in a note to staff members. Rumors of layoffs had circulated for weeks, ever since word leaked that sports reporters who had been expected to travel to Italy for the Winter Olympics would not be going. But when official word came down, the size and scale of the cuts were shocking, affecting virtually every department in the newsroom. And so I wanted to remind our viewers, too, that January of last year, the Washington Post also laid off 100 or more staffers, 100 and something staffers. It has not been getting better for them. It has gotten significantly worse for them. So, Jim, what will you use to wipe your tears?
I don't know. I might surprise you a little bit with my take on this, as most people listening and watching this podcast know. Before I came to the Heartland Institute, I was an ink-stained wretch who was in the real newspaper business. I called myself a reporter, not a journalist, or a newspaper man, as they used to call themselves. And I was trained how to be a journalist by, frankly, old, crusty, blue-collar men and women who came up through the business like I did, starting out at small newspapers and, working your way up and through your talent, your ability to dig out stories, to cover something, breaking news quickly and get that information to the people. That's the journalism that I was trained to do and did for nearly 20 years before getting out of the business. And I have to say, I don't think there's anybody that was laid off at the Washington Post that did not deserve to be laid off because they didn't lay off actual journalists. They laid off propagandists. But a part of me is a little bit sad. My hometown newspaper, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, is going away in the next few weeks or months. They're just not going to exist anymore. There's still going to be a newspaper in Pittsburgh, the one that I worked at, which was the Tribune Review. If you read Twitter, you would think that there's going to be no news coverage at all in Pittsburgh anymore because the big liberal newspaper's gone away. But it's still going to happen. But there's a part of me that still kind of misses the business, but it's not the business as it is today, but a business that existed 20 years ago. It was a different time. There was no internet. I remember in the Tribune Review when I worked there was one computer that was connected to the internet with the dial-up. I know Linnea is probably going to pass out from realizing how old I am and how crazy that sounds, but it is true. There was one computer that was hooked up to the internet that you could use for research. Then you go back to your desk on your, basically a DOS machine and type out your story. But back then, seeing your name in print on a byline was thrilling. Seeing your story on the front page and seeing your name there, in the window box of the where you would buy a newspaper for a quarter, that was a thrill for me. Knowing that thousands of people were going to be reading my words, whether I wrote news or opinion, was a real thrill because it was a unique thing. Newspapers mattered to people. It was where people got their news, obviously television and radio, but people would hold it in their hand and they would read it cover to cover. I used to be that person, but we don't live in that world anymore. That world is long, long gone. Everybody can see their name, online. Everybody is a reporter now. Everybody is sharing can build their own audience via a YouTube channel or their X account or on Facebook. So, the newspaper model was basically been broken for decades now. And so this isn't a big surprise, but the reason the Washington Post is laying off a third of its staff, and eventually I think all of their staff, is because, Jeff Bezos is not going to lose $100 to $150 million in perpetuity on a newspaper that isn't really a newspaper anymore, but is a propaganda arm for one political party in this country and one set of viewpoints on an outlook on the world in this country, and that's a leftist viewpoint on the world. And I was thinking this morning about, where this all started. And I got out of the newspaper business. My last job at a real newspaper was in Southern California, and I left that position in 2006 or 7. I think it was 2007. And then went to work for a business publication, then ended up happily, very happily at the Heartland Institute. But that was nearly 20 years ago. And about that time, 20 years ago, a certain politician came upon the scene by the name of Barack Obama. And even though I was just out of the business, I was shocked at the way the reporters around the country reported on Barack Obama, meaning they didn't report on Barack Obama. They created this myth of Barack Obama, this enlightened being, this person who is, we're not even worthy of this person. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, that was really the moment that the newspaper business turned. And it turned really from reporting on politicians, reporting on what's happening in the world in practical terms, giving people the facts and not opinions. Barack Obama is the one who really broke the newspaper business and the legacy media model. And they've never turned back from that. And that's where this is the end of the road that started 20 years ago in the fluffing up of, frankly, a mediocrity and a very inexperienced politician like Barack Obama. He was sold to the people of this country and elected twice. And that would not have happened if the media actually reported on him instead of promoted him as some sort of inevitable enlightened being that we needed to put into power to save the country. That's the moment it really turned, I think.
Okay, I've got a slightly different take on this. I think that newspapers in general are going out of business because it costs a lot of money to operate printing presses and all these things. And the vast majority of people, the vast overwhelming majority, do not have newspaper subscriptions anymore. So it's just an economic problem that they have all these printing presses and all these resources that they have to constantly upgrade and maintain, but they're not selling as many newspapers. So I don't think this is necessarily having to do with the fact that the media has gone totally, left woke crazy over the past, 20 or so years, as with people just aren't buying newspapers as much. I mean, the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times, the New York Times, they're all struggling. And obviously the future is the internet. And that's why I think these publications are placing a lot more emphasis on their websites than they are on their physical newspapers. Another thing is, and I've noticed this because I pitch op-eds. There's been mass consolidation in the newspaper industry. So a lot of the independent small town newspapers, they've all been bought up by these conglomerates. So they're all kind of operate generally on the same content. They run the same op-eds. A lot of these places, they don't even have editorial staffs where they write op-eds and editorials that are specific to that newspaper. The Chicago Tribune, they did a mass firing a couple of years ago of their entire editorial staff. And if you look, they basically now just run syndicated columnists. So I think it's much more to do with the failing business model because people literally don't buy newspapers anymore than it has to do with their, crazy woke agenda. But I'm sure the crazy woke agenda has not helped.
Well, yes, the newspapers are going out of business. The industry is deteriorating and it's going to disappear. I don't see why it wouldn't. But I think there is a certain element there that it's self-inflicted and wokeness is a big part of it. Remember that this is the industry that bragged about taking down a sitting president, and this is the newspaper that did that. They say, well, we took down Nixon, that dirty, evil person. So we're the heroes. We protect you from all the evil of the world. And the newspapers, they created this sense that the journalist is this great hero who, what do they afflict the powerful and comfort the afflicted. It's like, that's not your job. Your job is to sell newspapers. And they were good at that. But then really starting in the 1960s, everything starts to deteriorate in our country. And the newspapers were part of it, and journalism was part of it. And it started in the 60s, it accelerated in the 90s, and then it just took off like a rocket ship in the 2020s. I mean, in the 90s, you had just the obvious liberal bias in the newspapers. It became very powerful, and people would talk about it all the time. Political correctness. Remember that phrase? And then now it's like, oh, okay, they're actually participating in government censorship. They're all pretending that the Hunter Biden laptop was created by Russians. They did this. They went from, we took down a sitting president, just happened to be a Republican. I didn't like Nixon, but they were bragging about that. And then they said, oh, hey, you know what? This guy, Biden, he's good. He's a fantastic guy. And his kid, that thing's fake. That's fake. His kid doesn't take drugs, and Joe Biden didn't have anything to do with weird goings on in Ukraine, and there's no corruption going on there. It's like, are you kidding me? So they did this to themselves, and now they're whining about it. And hey, look, I feel sorry for anybody who gets let go from their job. However, these people shouldn't have had a job for decades.
Yeah, but
they were not responsible people. They were not real journalists.
Well, but I know, but it's not just the journalists that are being fired. I mean, they got rid of their entire sports department because they've realized that AI can write a literally brief, blurb about a baseball game if you just give it the box score. So there's a lot of other things that are going on here, and a lot of it's money. These people, they have salaries, and it's a lot easier if you have a technology that can just spit out a blurb. And I know for a fact that is happening at places like AP.
Oh, well,
so I mean,
yeah,
this is about money. This is not about politics.
That's absolutely the point, though, that they made what the newspapers were selling in the last really 3 decades. What they were selling was social status. They're saying if you read our newspaper and you parrot the things that we tell you, your neighbors will think you're smart and you're cool and you're a very thoughtful person and a person who cares about things and so forth. And it was a whole lot of rubbish. They were selling social status, and they destroyed that selling point by politicizing everything.
Newspapers are also failing, incredibly. So this is not a political thing.
What conservative newspapers? The only one that's out there is the Wall Street Journal. And it's not even conservative. The Wall Street Journal isn't even conservative.
Look at the Washington Times subscription model. Is it going up or down? Look at it. They don't even send it out now 7 days a week anymore. I mean, lots of newspapers, by far. I mean, the New York Times had to be bailed out by Carlos Slim. Remember, the Mexican billionaire, like a decade or so ago. So, guys, I mean, I was saying is that I think it's kind of not true to say this is all about, left-wing politics when it's really about an industry that's just dying. And this is like the last stages.
It's not all about left-wing politics, but left-wing politics was the driver of their self-destruction.
I think technology and people's changes in daily news consumption is
sports
actually
reports and all that. What the heck? There's so many blogs
that's because young
sports and so forth.
But Sam, that's because young people don't go buy newspapers. I mean, that's what this is.
I believe that the Washington Post can survive if they have a staff the same size as the Daily Caller.
Right.
They can survive. So you get.
But the Daily Caller doesn't have. But the Daily Caller doesn't have a behemoth, printing press and all that stuff. They're a much smaller, agile, adept, group of people who literally just have like a small office. That's the point here, is that their model of having this huge building and then another almost like factory-like building to print a newspaper that is not being bought by people, hence it's losing money. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, the newspaper, printing out the physical newspaper, that's an albatross around these legacy media outlets. Next, that an outlet like the Daily Caller or Breitbart.com and other things that are successful, hot air, do not have, obviously, and that's a problem. But Sam is right that the real, as I think I said in my comments to begin this segment, it's the lying. There's an X account I follow. I really like to follow, called Cynical Publius, and he had a comment on this just yesterday. A long comment, but there was a sentence that really stuck out to me. He said, and he was commenting on how the lamenting of, like, reporters who think their full-time job is to hang out on Twitter all day instead of investigating government corruption. But them lamenting the downfall of the Washington Post. He says, "We hate you because you lie to us and then pretend you are not lying while engaging in grotesque self-aggrandizement." That one sentence really captures the modern media landscape today, and the problem with modern so-called journalism. It's the lies. John Nolte, as I mentioned, Breitbart.com, I believe he's the editor-in-chief over at Breitbart.com. He on X listed, you would scroll forever listing all of the blatant lies that were major news stories in just the last 5 or 6 years. Sam, you mentioned the Hunter Biden laptop hoax, or them saying it was a hoax, but it was real. The Russia collusion hoax. They gave themselves Pulitzer prizes for reporting a complete falsehood, which was that Trump was colluding with Russia to steal the 2016 election. And that went on for years and years. If your business model is to allow your staff to blatantly lie to the public year after year after year, after virtually every story except the sports department, except for a sports story, then don't be surprised when your business goes into the shitter, because that's where it should be. Because lying is not going to be rewarded with eyes on a website, or let alone purchasing a physical newspaper.
Yeah, well, and I would say too that it's a double whammy, right? Because they reduce their viewership, or their purchasing of the physical newspaper significantly by generation, right? Like, no one in my generation is subscribed to any of the print versions of these magazines or these newspapers, except for maybe people that work at them, right? Who want to get them to their house because it's something like special and cool, like Jim said, even now, to have your name on a byline in the New York Times, the Washington Post, or whatever. But then they decrease their viewership by another half by alienating everyone that's not in their bubble, by another half at least, by alienating everyone who's not in their bubble. So it's just cascading. But I mean, no one should be surprised that print journalism is going out. I think I made this reference a couple of weeks ago, but in the movie Zoolander, there's this joke where when they're at the funeral, and they're like, different journalists are coming and getting comments from Zoolander and from other people, and they're like, "I'm from the New York Times," or whatever, and he'll take a comment, and then they're like, "New York Times digital edition," and then he just like breezes past them, that kind of a thing. And that was a funny joke then, but now it's like, man, it's almost entirely reversed at this point. I mean, no one cares. And like this thing that's scrolling through here, just the amount of, not even things that are oh, they got it wrong because all the information wasn't out there yet, but like all the information is out there and they still perpetuate. I mean, half the stuff on this list they still talk about on like MSNBC and stuff, even though it's been proven false. So it's just a nightmare. And I'm not sad at all that the Washington Post is going away.
No.
It's kind of sad to see newspapers go away, but I'm not sad at all to see the Washington Post fail, because as far as I'm concerned, they deserve it.
The two worst things to happen to the profession of journalism was the movie All the President's Men, in which two pretty ugly news reporters in Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein were portrayed by Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. And the idea that that's the job of a journalist to do what they were doing. And the second thing was the rise and proliferation and the fluffing of J school, journalism school. I can't tell you, when I was, I was in a pretty elite area as a reporter. When you cover the White House, you fly on Air Force One and you go to the White House press briefing room and you're covering Congress and all that stuff. That was a dream of mine. I never thought I'd be able to achieve when I was a college journalist at the University of Pittsburgh, but there I was. And almost everybody around me had gone to J school, and all of the people around me had gone to an elite university like Brown or Harvard or something like that. I went to public school, and public college, and my first beat was covering the sewer board of McKean County, Pennsylvania. But I was trained by people who were real shoe leather journalists. Um, the all the President's Men and going to J school taught an entire generation after me of journalists that their job was not to tell people what was happening in the world, in their local community, in Congress, at the White House. Their job was to crusade to save the world by convincing people that leftism is good and anything that opposes leftism is bad. So this has been happening for decades, and the Washington Post would still be maybe they would have to slim down a little bit. Maybe they would have to refocus their coverage if they were fair, if they were real reporters again. That this won't be fixed until and unless the professional journalism remembers what they're supposed to do, what their job really is. And it's not to tell you what to think, it's just to tell you what the hell's happening. And we're going to lose that. And that's a shame. Something will come in and take its place. In fact, people are learning what's happening by reading X, by curating their own media feeds. And that's just really what the future is now. But this wouldn't have to be this way if it wasn't for the self-destruction, the ideological self-destruction of an entire profession.
I actually think social media has played a giant role in destruction of dinosaur newspapers, because people don't want to actually have to thumb through a newspaper and read a long article. You know what they want? They want a headline delivered to them that's going to keep their attention. So I think, once again, this is not about the political leanings of the Washington Post. This is about the newspaper industry has been going downhill for a very long time, and it does not have the customer base that it did have, and therefore it cannot support having a staff of people when they are losing hundreds of millions of dollars because they aren't selling as many newspapers. And I would add one last thing. The average price of a newspaper has skyrocketed in recent years. Back in the day, the Chicago Tribune used to be, what, a quarter or 50 cents? It's almost $5 now. Just think about that. That just goes to show how messed up their core business model is. And a lot of these companies have millions of dollars in pensions. So I just really think this is more about the fundamental problems within the newspaper industry as a whole, as opposed to their crazy left-wing agenda. However, I completely agree with you that has turned off a large portion of their would-be subscribers. However, once again, I just think that, Linnea's generation and even my generation, man, I used to bring a newspaper when I was a caddy, and I would read it. Everyone would come up to me and be like, dude, why do you do that? Just use your phone. My apartment complex in Evanston, when I lived there, we had a big tub outside where everyone would throw in the newspaper. In my apartment complex now, one person in the entire building gets a newspaper, and it's the Wall Street Journal. That's what I'm trying to talk about, guys.
Yep, and that's absolutely true. And so I'm going to transition a little bit clumsily here to our next topic, which is another area that Chris in particular is very, very well versed in. And in fact, I'm going to be, once again, Chris, I'm sorry, reading your own words at you for the beginning of this segment here. This is a story that you wrote for Red State, where you said the title is Mamdani's Socialist Education Agenda Will Further Harm New York City Public School Students. I'm going to read a little bit from that, so bear with me for a minute. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's education platform is loaded with socialist slogans like ensuring public schools are fully funded with equally distributed resources and free childcare for every New Yorker aged 6 weeks to 5 years. But the truth is that New York City public schools are not suffering from a lack of funding, and New York City parents are not demanding universal government-run childcare. The real problem, which Mamdani's socialist policies will not address, is the fact that the New York City public schools operate in a near monopolistic fashion, free from accountability to the parents they should be serving first and foremost. In the 2025-2026 school year, New York City public schools will spend $42.8 billion. That's with a B, guys. most of which will not be spent in the classroom. In total, only $16.6 billion, less than 40% of the total budget, is allocated for K through 12 schools and instruction. All right. Nearly half of that amount, $8.5 billion, will be spent on employee benefits and pensions, and close to $4 billion, about 10% of the total budget, will be spent on debt payments. So we've talked a lot over the years at the Heartland Institute about the issue with public schools and that it is not a lack of funding. In fact, many of our schools, especially in the Chicagoland area, are kind of overfunded, and it's not the kids that are getting it. Chris goes on to say, since 2015, New York City student scores have declined in nearly every subject. In 2024, only 23% of New York City eighth graders were proficient in math, and less than 30% were proficient in reading. So what Mamdani is doing to fix this is, in part, to eliminate gifted programs for kindergartners, which, to be fair, as Chris pointed out this morning, is not an exclusively leftist idea. Some people say that kindergarten is too early for gifted programs anyway. The problem, though, is that those gifted programs, as AEI explains in an article, the war against gifted education continues. They explain that ending the program would undermine a critical ladder of merit-based opportunity in the public education system and hurt the very students it claims to help. Gifted education has been an easy target for the left's progressive populists. The program enrolls about 2,500 of the city's 55,000 kindergartners, but attracts roughly 10,000 applicants. These classes often feed into the elite middle and high schools, offering a rare public path to advanced learning. So critics see inequality there, but most parents see a lifeline for children that are unchallenged in regular classrooms. And then one more reading for you guys here. So from the Free Press, they explain that this feels like Groundhog Day for public school parents like me, who fought, not me, the author, who fought former Mayor Bill de Blasio's efforts to end G&T, abolish entrance exams for the city's prestigious specialized high schools, and root out, in the name of anti-racism, any honors programs that smacked of academic excellence. So, Chris, what on earth is going on here, and how on earth is any of this supposed to help anyone?
Well, first of all, this is not exclusive to New York City schools. This is happening at school districts across the country. The United States as a whole spends more money on education than almost all the other OECD countries. So this canard, this lie that we are grossly underfunding our education system just has to be dispelled. And it can be dispelled very easily because all this data is available. All this data is out there. You can go and you can see it for yourself. It didn't take me that long to search and find the budget for the New York City public school system. And like I wrote there, I mean, it's pretty bad. Less than 40% is going to actually helping classrooms. There's so much money that's being siphoned off for the bureaucracy, for other things that have nothing to do with education. And when I was teaching in Chicago, in the Chicagoland area, and I also taught in South Carolina, and I saw the same thing happening at schools in the posh Chicago suburbs, as well as in quote unquote the sticks of South Carolina. So this is emblematic across this country. And it's just really, frustrating when, people always say, well, the problem is that we are not spending enough money on education. When we are spending more than enough money on education, we're not spending it properly. That is what I'm trying to that's what I'm trying to explain to people. As for the New York City gifted program, it is important to note that Mamdani does not want to completely eliminate it, because when I was doing research, I saw a lot of people saying that is just a complete lie. All he has said is that he thinks that the kindergarten entrance exams should be changed because, as that author pointed out, and I agree, it's very early for someone to be put into a honors or talented and gifted degree program when they're 4 or 5 years old. I mean, that's, I think, just too young for that. And once you're in that track, it's well, if you're not in that track early on, it's difficult to get on to get into it later in life, is one way, of putting it. So it's just so sad that we are blowing billions of dollars literally billions of dollars on total waste, fraud, and abuse. And meanwhile, our nation's students are literally becoming dumber. And I do not say that with any sort of happiness. I devoted almost a decade of my life saying, I'm going to help make these kids, or I'm going to teach them how to think for themselves. I realized very early on that in education, in public education, I should say, because I had a very different experience in my private education periods. It's not about teaching them what to think. It's not about teaching them how to think. It's teaching them what to think. And I mean, if you guys want to talk about politics in the classroom has been happening for a very long time, and it's really bad. So that's, our education system is so broken, but the solution is so simple. Education choice. Imagine this: instead of spending $42,000 per student in New York City, which is how much they are spending, what if they cut that number in half and said, we're just going to give $20,000 check to every parent, and then you determine where you want your son and daughter to go to school? Because guess what? The average price for a private school in New York State is $20,000. So that just goes to show it's not a money thing. It's a wasting resources thing. And I think it's also a very big problem with lack of competition, because basically you are mandated to go to the public school based on your zip code, regardless of that, if that school is actually producing academic achievement, or let alone even keeping the students safe. I didn't mention this in that article, but it bears mentioning that New York City schools are notoriously unsafe. More than half say that they do not feel safe in their classrooms. That is another huge part of this. I mean, I know I'm going in a ton of different directions here, but that just opens up another can of worms that I realized early on in my teaching career. Discipline in public schools has totally, has gone away. You almost can't discipline students. And there's a lot of reasons why, but you know what that does? I had this happen so many times. You get one or two really, really bad students, and they ruin it for everybody else. And I hate to say that, but that happens so many times. I would have students come up to me and just say, please, isn't there anything we can do to get so-and-so, so they're not disrupting the class all the time? Because you know what? We should never forget this. And I know this, and I really know this. A lot of kids want to go to school and they want to learn. I had so many students who would come up to me before school, after school, during lunch, always just, can you please help me? And of course, that's what I'm here to do. I want to help you. So it just really frustrates me when I have to see, teacher union officials and politicians sit there and say, it's all about the money and there's no money. What are you talking about? We spend more money than almost any other country, and our results are almost worse than any other country. So that's just, kind of where I'm at this point.
Yeah. Just my take on this. I mean, it's just a reminder that there's nothing that leftists touch that doesn't become ruined, and usually quickly. And I'm literally nothing. I mean, when it gets its hands on an institution, it's on the path to inevitable destruction. It happened to journalism, as we just talked about. It's happening in Hollywood right now, and it's already destroyed our public school system. That was once, remember, I mean, we have some older people watching and listening to this podcast. The public school system in the United States used to be the envy of the world, not just in K through 12, but our public universities. Public university in the state of California was some of the best in the country, and it was free for a while. And public school kids put men on the moon. Public school kids today can't even do basic arithmetic before they go to college, because even Ivy League schools have to have basic math courses to get people up to speed to do supposedly college level work. Public schools today are more interested in leading their students out of the classroom to go on ice marches, and they previously led their students into BLM marches or anti-MAGA marches or pride marches and parades. So the entire system has been just completely ideologically captured by radical leftists. And as for the finances, we were going over that in the beginning of this segment. I was reminded of a great line that the great columnist Mark Stein once wrote about the American auto industry. He said, that's really just a retirement and pension business that happens to make a few cars. The public school system today is a pension system and a payment system for indoctrinated teachers, but mostly administrators, as Chris well knows. I mean, the budgets for public schools have exploded all over the country, and anybody who pays property taxes knows this. Almost all of the money, if not all of the money, the increasing budgets go to administration. They don't go to actually even hire more teachers. They certainly don't go into more classroom materials to help kids learn. They don't go to extra tutoring and extra programs that are academic in nature. They all go to administration, and that's from K through 12, and especially in the university system. All of the inflation, all of the money is going to useless administration, not into teaching our kids what they need to know to succeed in life.
That is a very important point. And Linnea, if you can bring up that Hill op-ed, because I cited this and I think I've memorized it. But since 2020, the percentage of teachers in schools has actually been less than 50%. I just want people to think about that for 1 second. That means that we have more administrators, and I think it's like 52 or 53% now, than teachers. That is just so mind-boggling. And I experienced that. I definitely experienced that, where you've got vice principal and then the administrative this, and then the administrator for that, and then this office and that office. It's just, the bureaucracy has exploded, and the district, whenever I had to go to the district offices, Linnea, in your neck of the woods over in Beaufort, I think it was like Mink Boulevard or whatever that road is. Guess what? It was massive. And we were just talking about office after office after office after office. And that's where a lot of this money is going. That is 1000% true.
A proliferation of rules and an expansion of bureaucracy is the sign of a dying institution. And that is what's happening to education. And again, the dummies killed it. The politics killed it. Politics destroys, Jim's right, that it's anything that liberals touch, they destroy. But it's politics that does that. When you distribute things via politics, it's about who has political power. That does not tell you, political power does not tell you the value of something, the real value of it. Dollars and cents tell you that value. So when Chris talks about school choice, he's talking about getting dollars and cents numbers on the value of school to the parents and so forth. What is the value of school to a taxpayer at this point? Frankly, it's negative value, because these kids go into these schools as normal human beings and emerge as, well, I hesitate to say what they emerge from those schools as. Just look. And you'll notice. But this is the problem. It's politics that destroys everything. If things are done on the basis of what do you want and what are you willing to put out for it, then you get the best distribution of resources. The system we have now is it's imploding, it's self-destructing, and it is just as stupid as can be, and it's just going to get stupider until it collapses.
I'd like to really emphasize a point that Sam just made, because I had to go through a 2-year program to get my master's degree in secondary education. And I went to a college in downtown Chicago called National Lewis University. There it is. Okay. So yeah, sorry, but I'm going to call these things out. I called out my old high school too in that article. So National Lewis University, spent 2 years there. And I would say 90% of my time there was not about becoming a better teacher. It was about becoming a left-wing organizer. And I swear to that. I remember the first gen class that I had to go to, and I opened the textbook, and it was literally about like almost like a rules for radical type thing. And I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, what do you think about this? And he's like, that's a really bad sign. But I was like, uh-oh. And a couple times I did say, wait, why are we spending so much time on this? Shouldn't we be talking about how to be, good instructors and, classroom management and planning and all that? And we were just told, that doesn't matter. Really, that's basically what we were told, that doesn't matter, that, we were basically being groomed to be social justice warriors. In my cohort, I think there were about 30 students in my little cohort. I'd say about 20 of us had major problems with this, and we would talk about it, and all we all we could do was say, man, this really, is really bad, but we got to toe the line because we want to get our, we want to pass these classes. We were also paying. So it's, so it's a really, sick system. But the teaching colleges, and this was a while ago, I've heard way worse horror stories about teaching colleges nowadays. I've even heard that, like doctor teaching colleges, they aren't talking about how to be a good doctor. They're talking about social justice. It's so crazy to me.
Well, and speaking of that too, that's a good segue actually to another thing that I wanted to bring up here is that more and more and more, it seems like students, not like college students, but high school, middle school, elementary school students are being recruited by teachers and administrators to do like walkouts on their school campus and always for a left wing thing. I mean, the only times you ever hear about someone doing a right wing thing is like maybe a Catholic school sends their kids to the March for Life or something. But other than that, you almost never hear about it the other way. And so there's a video here from Nick Sordor on X of some kids in Maine doing an anti-ICE walkout carrying a sign that says F ICE. And these are students, and when I was in school, you were not allowed to even wear a t-shirt to class that had like a cartoon firearm on it. So I don't know where this is just the dissolving of standards across the board. But here's a video. We have it.
Yeah, fuck ICE is one of the signs.
There you go.
This is absurd.
It's changing the world, guys.
Okay.
Donald doctrine, this stuff that ridiculous.
Keep in mind, I guarantee you, half of those can't read
Came to high school
at grade level.
Epitome of
Guaranteed.
Marxist activism.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
And half of them don't care about this at all. They're just glad
They're just walking along.
Yeah, of course.
Fresh air for a walk
Of course.
and don't have to do schoolwork.
Yeah, crazy stuff. And Soder points out that Maine actually has some of the lowest test scores in the nation too. Like it's a nightmare across the board here.
But this is not just happening in these like left-wing enclaves.
No.
So Linnea, Bluffton, South Carolina, where I taught for the majority of my career.
Yeah.
In 2016, when Donald Trump won the election, the next day, almost all the teachers wore black. And I asked them, why are you wearing black? And they go, well, because, we're basically at a funeral for the country. And then they would tell their students that. And then I remember because I was in the social studies department, and there were about, 2 or 3 of us kind of in a little cluster of classrooms at the end of a hallway. And some of the teachers who obviously knew better were telling their students, if they were Mexican or Hispanic, you better not come to school anymore because you're going to get deported. And I remember some of those students would come up to me and ask that, and I'd say, no, that's not going to happen. But they're scaring them. And these are vulnerable kids who are susceptible to this kind of stuff. And these people know better than that. And it's just really sad that these teachers are spending more time playing politics in their classrooms than they are teaching their kids how to read, how to write, how to do math, how to do science, or, the basics, the most basics of American history.
Yep. It's pretty bad out there. It is remarkable when you see test scores crashing. Actually, near me too, there was another one of these anti-ICE protests from a high school, and it seemed like, and it was in Atlanta, I think, and it seemed like they weren't even like chaperoning the kids at all for it. It wasn't like a march. They just let all the kids like run outside screaming, throwing things, goofing off kind of stuff. Like it was just bizarre that the schools are orchestrating this stuff. These kids did not get together and say, hey, we want to do an ICE march when it's clearly like 20 degrees outside. None of them want to do that. And COVID was really a bad moment too. Well, it was a bad moment for students losing out on a lot of learning, but now I'm wondering how much learning they were actually doing in school anyway. but it was a good thing in that it showed parents just how bad it was, because there have been several big stories the last couple of years about parents finding out that, like, in their classes, their teachers are barely teaching anything at all, especially for like middle school and elementary school kids and stuff, worse than you would anticipate. And parents were kind of like getting up in arms about it and stuff. And the administrators were like, "Why? Well, it would be not fair to our teachers for you to, push them to do more and stuff." And it's like, it's not about the teachers. I don't.
Exactly. It's about
What
the
are you
students.
talking about? Yeah, it's
Remember, creating or making children making children incapable of doing simple math and reading and knowing their history and so forth makes them dependent on the government. So this is, as the communists used to say, it is no coincidence that the government schools create ignorance and expand ignorance the best they can. They love this. They love this. They want people to be on welfare all their lives, and then obviously vote for communists to continue that process. Sad.
There are some easy solutions to this. One of them is just put a camera in the classroom. I was very much in favor of that when I was teaching, because then also if a kid is absent, guess what? They could just go watch my lecture and presentation and then, do their notes and everything like according to that. It would also allow the parents to know exactly what I'm teaching their students, and they have every right to know that. I had parents come in and ask me about other teachers and what they were, kind of like indoctrinating their students with. And it was very awkward because it's not my place to get in between another teacher and how they choose to act in the classroom. I can't do that. That's for the principal, the vice principal, but that's a whole nother, problem, because firing or even disciplining teachers is nearly impossible.
Yeah, I mean, the job of a teacher today is not to teach your children how to read and write and teach them about the history of the United States and history of the world and all of that stuff. I mean, I used to love social studies. I can't even imagine sitting through a social studies class in modern public schools. But the teachers today don't see that as their job. Their job, as you can see from those marches, is to create more little activist leftists. And they will say this. They've said this out loud. And the job of the teachers union is not to ensure that the public school system teaches future generations what they need to know to succeed. Their job is to protect the jobs and to increase the salaries of the teachers. And I forget who had said it, that if you want to advocate for students, let them get their own union.
That was Albert Shanker.
Yeah, right. And
president of the NEA. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And thanks for running this B-roll here, Andy, producer Andy, because this reminds me of, I've given some presentations. It's been a few years, but I've given presentations in high schools over the years, and I was always just shocked at just the absolute drabby dress of every student in the classroom. How many girls I saw walking around to class in pajamas and fuzzy slippers. It's like, if there's that lack of discipline in even one's appearance in school, it's no wonder that these kids can't learn. I mean, just look at the slobs. It's just sad. And you wouldn't see that in a private school. That's one of the benefits of going to a private school, is most of them do have dress codes, and it's there for a reason. It's to institute discipline, because without discipline, you cannot learn. Discipline is the most important skill to develop so that you can be a successful person. It's sad.
Private schools have accountability, and that's what public schools are lacking, because a private school, you have to work to keep your customer. Because if your customer, your parent or your student for that matter, is not happy with the state of the education occurring in said private school, what can they do? They can go to another private school in the area. And one other thing that always stood out to me was the teacher who helped get me hired in Bluffton, and she was from Chicago. She was a very nice woman. She had several kids. And she told me she would never, ever, ever let them go to public schools, and she put them in private schools. And I always kind of thought that was strange, because she's basically saying the public school that I work at is so bad that I would not let my own kids go to it. And she had to pay lots of money out of her pocket. And she told me all this stuff. And I just that always stuck with me. I think that was such an indictment of the public school system in a pretty nice town in South Carolina. So this is not just happening in places like New York City or Los Angeles. This is happening all over this country.
Ray Quazza asks, what's Heartland's opinion on homeschooling? Well, Heartland, as a group, believes that you should have the choice to do it if you want to, of course. Individually, we might have different levels of whether or not it's the best choice or not. I certainly think it is the best choice. All the greatest men of history were homeschooled or community type homeschooled, which is what most homeschooling is now anyway. It's not just like mom has to sit in a room and teach their kids 8 hours a day the way that they do at in public schools or something. It's a lot of the time like a community effort, and there are so many resources now. Most of them are for free even. Lots of great stuff. I've never met a homeschool kid that was like the stereotype that you heard about growing up, where, people would say, or mostly public school propagandists would say, well, if you homeschool your kids, they're going to be poorly socialized and weird and blah, blah, blah. Well, if a homeschool kid is weird because they're polite and they're well-read and stuff, and that makes them weird, fine, good. My kids are weird. If I had kids, like that would be a benefit. I would love that level of weird.
During the pandemic, there was a lot of innovation in the homeschooling environment with those like pod schools and like if 4 or 5 families on like a lane, got together and they would say, okay, we're going to share the responsibilities. Okay, this parent knows more about math or whatever it is. So there are so many options. It's the mandated government schools that are, crushing the innovation and destroying any sort of, advancements in the education sector. And that is really sad.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that's unfortunately all the time we have today, you guys. Thank you, everyone, for your attention to these matters. We at the In the Tank podcast are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Jim, what do you have for the audience today?
We have the Climate Realism Show coming up on the same channel and at the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow is going to be a great show. Hope to see you there.
Awesome. Sam?
Thanks, Linnea. We have great information at heartland.org. Please go there and also check out my Substack, which is on the little crawl there.
And Chris?
Go to Amazon and buy this book. Got that?
Yep, got it. All right, you guys, for audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using. Leave a review. Hit the like button right now. You can do it right now. You can share this on X if you're watching it on X, or Facebook. If you're watching it on YouTube, just click the little like button. That's all. All right, so thank you so much to all of our usual panelists, and also, as always, to our viewers. We will see you again next week.